Hey, welcome folks. We're going to get started here. Hopefully this turns out a little better than last time. We had a few technical issues. Let me just make sure I've got my audio set up here. I can hear myself. Welcome to the stream tonight. Let me flip over to our plan for the evening. So we're going to create a statically hosted website using S3. We're going to tie S3 to CloudFront. And we're going to set up a special CloudFront user called an Origin Access Identity, or an OAI user, that allows us to protect, in this case, the origin for our CloudFront distribution, which is S3. Basically is a bucket policy that allows only the OAI user the ability to make queries to the origin. We'll create our CloudFront distribution, and then we're going to update our Route 53 site, or sorry, our Route 53 record to point to the CloudFront deployment, and hopefully at that point we will have a functioning website. So that's the plan for tonight. All right, so let's just jump right in. We're gonna create our public cert first. CloudFront requires this. As far as I know, the last time I looked at least, CloudFront doesn't support non-SSL connections when you're using S3 like this. So we create this all the time. So let me just start this up. And we'll just call this template acm.yaml. So we're going to use the certificate manager to do this. Okay. I've got the documentation open, so let me just flip over to the doc here. So I've got a new layout on my laptop here, and it's getting taking some getting used to. So here we go. This is the certificate manager. Make this a little bigger. Okay, so here's what we have to define. We're not creating a private cert, so we don't need the certificate authority, transparency logging. We don't care about that. We do have to provide the domain name. Okay. We have to provide how we want to validate that we own this domain, so we'll set that up. We're just going to create a wildcard domain for our host. If we didn't have that wildcard, we could add some alternative names, but we're just going to do a star, so that's easy. And then, like we've done through all these demos, tags, and we're also going to define the validation method. So not really that hard to get this set up. So let's, I'm going to keep this open as my cheat sheet, and we'll flip back to the editor. Okay. We are going to pass some parameters here. So like I've done in the past, I'll just set that as a placeholder for the time being. So we're just going to call this cert0, and it's what? I got to have a quick look. Yeah, AWS certificate manager certificate. Okay, so let's define the attributes that we need for this cert. Essentially, we need the domain name, and in this case, we're just going to say star.acmewidgets.xyz. That should cover off essentially the wildcard for this. We also need, what is it, domain validation options. And if I flip back to the doc here, there's a couple settings that we have to do here. So let's have a look. We have to provide the domain name. We have to provide the hosted zone ID. In this case, we do have a hosted zone ID. I registered this earlier today in Route 53, and the validation domain. So let's set those up. Yeah, I'm regretting this decision on my new layout of the laptop here. So we've got domain name. In this case, it's just acmewidgets.xyz. I'm going to put that in. I don't think I need single quotes around that, but just so it's consistent with what I did above. The hosted zone ID, we'll set this as a parameter. So we'll just call this, I'll call it R53 zone ID. It's a string. And you know what? We're not going to set a default value for this. We'll pass it in our CI script. So we'll refer to what did I call it? R53 zone ID. And then the last thing was validation domains. What is that? The domain name to which you want ACM to send validation emails. So we're not going to use email validation for this. We're going to use domain validation. So we don't have to worry about that one. What's the next piece? I mentioned the alternative names. We don't care about that because we're just setting a wildcard. So we need to define the validation method. And this is just either email or DNS. So we're going to use DNS. Okay. And then like we've done throughout the demos, we'll set up our standard keys, or sorry, our standard tags. All right, and we'll set all those up here as well. So owner, type string. I'm going to leave all these blank tonight. We're going to do something a little different, so we'll just define all these like this. Okay. I am going to still set this one up, and the reason is just to demonstrate again this idea of allowed values, right? I want to make sure that owner email is pretty much free-form text. User can put whatever they want there. But in this case, I want to control what somebody can pass. So you can make this development, production, or test, like we've done in the past. Right? So that's essentially what we need for our cert. We are going to tonight, just to change it up a little bit, the last couple times I think I've deployed through the management console. Tonight we're going to set this up the way that we would do this in GitLab. So GitLab is our tool of choice for this. I'm going to set up some what I like to call global variables. Okay, so the owner, these are the values we're going to pass in when we deploy this. Okay. One of the things that we often do is we set a project like this. Okay. What are we going to call this project? We'll just call it demo / static site. And then we need a profile. So this is basically when we're going to assume a role into our demo account, because our GitLab server isn't in the demo account. It's in another one of our accounts. And I think we just called this CO demo when we set it up. We're not going to do anything fancy. We're just going to say we're going to use a parallel validation phase, and then we'll do deployments in sequence. So I kind of just do this validation just to break it up a bit, and we're going to say ACM validate. And I've got stage, validate, and then our script, and I've got this so I don't have to remember the CLI command, right? We're just going to run the validate template CloudFormation CLI command, and we're going to point it at, what do we call this? ACM.YAML. Okay, so that's our validation phase. And then we'll set up our deploy phase here. So we're going to say ACM deploy. The stage is deploy ACM. And what I like to do is set up any what I'll call stage variables at this point. And I like to set the stack name here. So we're just going to call this demo ACM. I think that's the only variable we'll need. We'll rely on those global variables at the top, and then we set up our script. And I'm going to do the same thing. I've got this all ready to go here. Okay, so let's have a look at what we're doing here. See if I made the screen a little different. Won't let me. There we go. So we're actually going to deploy a change set. So this is what's happening right here. And we need to change this. Our stack name comes from our stage variable here. We're going to pass in, we've changed these names up, so it's owner email. We had project, and we're also going to set environment equals environment. We don't need the region because I've got a profile set up with all that ready to go in it. Okay. Now these need to come back here. We'll wait for the stack to exist, Again, we don't need that. We need profile. And then if we look at this, we're going to enable termination protection. And the same thing. We'll say dash dash profile, dollar profile. Perfect. So we're all set there. There's our first commit. And you know what? As I was typing this out, I was thinking to myself, you know, I don't think I actually set a project up for this in our GitLab repo. So just bear with me a second. I'm going to do that right now. I'm not able to actually pull that up on the screen just because there's some info in there I can't really share. So just bear with me a sec. I'm going to jump in and we're going to really quickly create this project. All right, so we've got the project built, and then I'm just going to set up GitLab. So just give me one more second. Don't know how I managed to forget to do this before I started. And these are demos. And static. And I find, I don't know if this is maybe me not understanding some of the options in GitLab, or not in GitLab, sorry, but in PyCharm. But I find when I do, if I put files into a directory and then initiate Git, what I find is PyCharm doesn't realize that this is a repo at this point. So I'm going to manually add these first ones. So we'll just add the files, and I'm just going to do the commit from command line. Okay, and we'll run the push. All right, so I think if that worked, let me just make sure that I've got what I want in. Okay, great. So I can show you this now. Let me flip over. So here's the project that I created in our GitLab environment. You can see I've got an error. So I've got some sort of typo. So let's just see what we got here. So it validated okay, but the deployment failed. Access denied. Oh, you know what? It must be the way I've got the role set up. That could be a challenging one. I tested this earlier and thought I had it going. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, see, we've got the, I just created a simple admin role here to handle this stuff. Let me just pull this over here for a sec. I'll leave you guys on the handy documentation page. I'm just going to validate that I've got the correct role information here. Maybe there's a, I've been having this typo issue lately, especially in demos, so maybe I've just mucked that up. So just give me a second. The reason I can't show this, or I don't want to show it, is just again because of some of the information in the roles. Apologize about the mess up. Trust relationships. Okay, so we got a trust relationship. That's all set. All right, let me just make sure that I've got this set up properly. If I can't find this really quickly, then we'll go back. I'll still type out the GitLab code so that you can see how that works, but I won't get too hung up on trying to figure out what I've done wrong here. We'll wait till next week. Yeah, that looks good. Oh, I think I see what it is. Hold on one sec. Yeah, okay. I'm going to re-push this. Just give me 1 second. I can do this because I've got this in a template already. Let me see if I can show you this. This is the way that we access our accounts, is by a simple cross-account access role for CloudFormation. And actually, you know what? Now, as I say it out loud, I can't show this because it's got external IDs that I'm gonna have to type in, and I don't want you to see that. So let me just grab this, and we'll quickly deploy it. And I need... It's the only thing I can think of at this point is that I've skipped over the external ID for this cross account, and I'm wondering if it just doesn't like that. Like I said, we'll give this one whirl, and if it doesn't work, we'll revert back to just deploying manually for tonight. Okay, so that is running right now. And as that's going, we're going to update a couple things here. I just need to change the ARN, the resource name for the yarn here. So I just got to give it a second to load. All right. All right, let's see if this works now. So let me go back to CloudFormation. Pull this back here so you can actually see what I'm up to here. All right, so still in Northern Virginia, and I'm our demo account, and I'm just going to rerun this pipeline. And like I said, if it fails here, we'll revert back to manual for tonight. Run the pipeline. Yeah, it doesn't like something I've done here. Oh, okay, that's good. There we go. That means we actually connected, but now I've got a real typo. So let's see if we can figure out the typo. I think we're through the access issues. So let's go back. It's basically in the tags. Ref owner email, ref environment. So that looks okay. To me, that means that in my CI script here, I've messed... Oh, you know what? I didn't have environment. There we go. So environment is coming through as null. And we said that, remember, we have development, production, or test. So we'll set it, the global environment variable, to development. And let's see here. Let's reload this from disk. It's still not thinking that it's a Git repo. So give me a sec. I'm going to reopen this and see if it comes back to life. There we go. Okay. Needed a quick reload. So let's just push this again and see if that fixes it. All right. You can't see any of the pop-ups. I'm not sure why that doesn't work, but okay, pushed. And let's flip back to the browser and see what this deploy does. Just now, another failure. Owner email must have values. All right, I thought I was pushing those. Let's see. Well, we missed the zone ID, which we have to grab, so that's easy to fix. Owner email, environment. You know what I did? I know what I did. Those are parameters. So what we're doing here is we're setting tags on the stack itself, but I still need to do this. Parameter overrides. Okay, so we had R53 hosted zone. I think I called it hosted zone ID, didn't I? Oh, just zone ID. So let's grab that. And we're going to set this. This is a good example of where I would set these as that idea of stage variables again. So zone ID. Then I have to say owner equals owner email equals owner email. And these are again our global variables, so they'll just fill in from the top if I can type. Okay. And this one I need to set. So we'll set that right here. And that I can find. I'm not going to switch for that. I'll just quickly grab the zone ID. Just give me a sec. And here's our zone ID. Okay, so let's try that another time here. So this should come to life here in a second. Okay, there we go. Well, it didn't fail immediately, so that's a good sign. It's most likely going to work. We'll jump over to CloudFormation. I'm feeling confident at this point. And there's our demo ACM. So we'll have a change set here. And if we look at this change set, it'll tell us what it's going to do. And it's going to create a new cert, add. So we'll say execute. While I'm waiting for that, I'm going to open up another tab because we will have to go in. I thought that if we were using Route 53, that the validation process was automated now, but I don't know if through CloudFormation that's true. So the last time I did this, it pops up like a CNAME that you have to add. We'll see if it does it again like that, or if it does it automatically. If we go back here, we can go into the zone. And we still just have the two records, right? The default records. So there we go. So see this is where we need to create a name record, and this is the value. So let's grab that. We'll go back over here and create a record. Amazon recently updated this interface. I like the old interface better than this, but I'm forcing myself to use it. Seems like a lot of clicks to set up a simple record. So that's the name that we want. Okay. And in this case, it's a CNAME we have to create to validate that we own this. All right. What am I doing here? Hold on. This is what I want, CNAME. Right there. And now we have to put in the value right here. And copy that and put that here. I think that's it. See what I mean? It's define simple record. I think it's this one. Yeah, there we go. So we basically put that in there. See what I mean? It used to be like just so easy to click through this. So here's our value. It's a CNAME, or sorry, this is our name. It's a CNAME, and it points to this value. And there it's not getting the whole thing. So I better just grab all of this to validation AWS. We'll go back and do that again. Okay, say define simple record, create simple record, and there we go. All right. I have found in the past that this step can take a little bit of time. So we're going to leave this and we're going to go back. We're going to have a look at our deployment plan and see what the next step is. So we're going to assume here that our ACM deployment works. So that's step 1 done. We're going to create the origin access identity CloudFront user as a way to protect the origin. This is a good example of protecting, in this case, the S3 bucket against like a cache busting attack where somebody has enough information to step around CloudFront. Without this OAI user, then all of the records within S3 could be accessed by anybody. So we want to force everybody to go through the CloudFront distribution. Okay, so let's go, and I'm actually gonna put all of this in a S3 template. So we'll set up our description again. A demo website. Okay. I'll probably have some parameters to pass in here, whether it's tagging parameters or something else. So we'll set that up, and now we can set the first record is our OAI user. So let's go back to the doc and see what we need to pass. Oops, there we go. See what we need to pass in to get this OAI user set up. Where's CloudFront? CloudFront. There's our origin access identity. So one record, or one attribute, I guess. CloudFront origin access identity config, and then what do we have in here? Literally nothing? Okay, yeah, that's easy. While we're here, let's check this and see what we're doing. There we go. So our cert's ready to go. Okay, so success there. So this is easy. We're going to say, I don't know, we'll just call this OAI user. AWS CloudFront, what is it called again? I'm going to cut and paste this because it's a long name, and I will definitely typo this. AWS Cloud, oh, see what I did? You tried to typo it right there. AWS CloudFront origin access identity. Oh, sorry, don't need that. There we go. Okay, set up our properties. And all it needed was, I'm going to cut and paste this again because it was another long property name. And it just had a comment. So we're just going to say OAI user for demo S3 website. Easy. All right, so step 1 complete at this point. We've got, in theory, if this deploys, we've got our CloudFront OAI user. So now we need to define our S3 bucket. We'll just call this, well, I'll just call it bucket 0. And this is S3 bucket. And define the properties. So let's go have a look at what we need to set up here. Where's S3? Oh, there, right in front of me. So we're going to have to create a bucket, and we're going to have to create a bucket policy. There's a lot of options that are available for a bucket, but in this case, it's a bucket that's going to be publicly accessible, so it's relatively easy to set up. We need to define up here the access control. We're going to allow public reads to the objects within this bucket. We also have to set up the website configuration, basically defining the index page and the error page. The error page is optional, but we'll define that. And then we have to give it a bucket name. Okay. All right, so step one is access control. And this is just public read. Okay, we're going to allow read access to the objects in the bucket because it's a website. And then we have to give it a bucket name. Now, oops, that's camel case like that. So I've had different things work here. Our main website, the Curious Orbit website, runs through an S3 bucket. So essentially, right now I'm setting up the way that we've set this up in the past for our website. We have a dynamically generated bucket name. That's the way that we would normally do this. When I was walking through the steps, kind of preparing for this so I wasn't coming out like completely in left field, I noticed that when I tried to do that same thing in the demo deployment, that it was giving me an error saying that it was something along the lines that the configuration, the CloudFront configuration didn't match the bucket name or something like that. And I was digging around a little bit, and it said that the bucket name, the bucket name assigned to the S3 bucket must match the domain name that you want to use. I thought that was a little odd because we haven't done that in the past, but I got it to work. So I'm actually going to follow what we did before. So I'm going to call this www.acmewidgets.xyz. Okay. The only thing I can think of is that when we did the original deployment for the website years ago, everything is in one account. So CloudFront, the OAI user, the S3 bucket, what else is there? The ACM, the certificate manager, everything's there. When I did this walkthrough the other night, just testing everything out, we actually had components spread across different accounts. And the reason was I didn't actually want to create a new certificate at that point. So I leveraged the certificate in the other AWS account. I leveraged Route 53 in the other AWS account. So the only thing I could think of is that because those resources were in other AWS accounts, that's why it was complaining that it didn't know how to match up the CloudFront distribution, the ACM, and the bucket. So I'm a little gun shy, and I don't want to get into a ton of troubleshooting. We're trying just to get this to work for everybody. So I'm going to go with a bucket name that we're just gonna hard code it to our www. Okay. The other thing in the list is website configuration. Okay. And the website configuration, let me just have a double check here. As I mentioned, you basically configure what you want the index document to be, what you want the error document to be. You can also set up redirects. So normally what we would have here is like, if you went to acmewidgets.xyz or www.acmewidgets.xyz, all goes to the same spot. We're not going to worry about the redirects today to keep it simple. So all we're going to do is set up our index document, and we'll just make that index.html, and we'll set up our error document. Okay, 404.html. And tags. I'm going to steal these out of here so I don't have to type them again. Badly spaced tags. So that's that. And then I'm going to steal again out of ACM the defaults. And we'll dump those into parameters. Looks good. So our deployment plan. In theory, we have our CloudFront user. In theory, we have our S3 bucket. And now we have to define our policy on the bucket. This is what we're going to use to allow the OAI user the ability to run, I think it's getObject. Okay, we'll double check. Okay, so we're just going to call this policy 0. I think it's bucket policy. Let's go back to the docs. Yeah, there it is. Simple resource definition, right? What bucket do you want to assign this to, and then what's the JSON document that defines the policy you want to assign to the bucket. So simple. And I've got this, I always find that the JSON or the policy definition is by far the most difficult part anytime you're doing this type of resource definition, whether it's a bucket policy, a key policy. So we tend to build these outside of CloudFormation to validate that they're working and then translate them into our CloudFormation resources. So I've got the bucket policy created already. I'm gonna cheat a little bit and just do the old cut and paste. Okay. So back here, properties. We got to define our bucket, and we'll just say ref to bucket 0, and then we need our policy document. And I'm wimping out here. I'm gonna grab this from here. Okay, I don't know if this is exactly what we need, but we're gonna have a look. Essentially, when I fix all the spacing, what we're saying here is allow this user the ability to run get objects. That's it. Okay, on our bucket, which we called bucket 0. Okay, and all of the objects within the bucket. So what we want here is we just want, I can't remember what I called that resource. So let's go have a look. Let's shorten this up so it's easier to type here, OAI. So what it's going to do is when you create this origin access identity user, what happens is the default output from that is a unique identifier for the OAI. And all we're doing here is substituting that value that's returned by that logical resource into the principal definition for our bucket policy. So we're basically saying, allow this OAI user to run a get object command. That's it. And I think the rest of this is good. I'm going to set up here, depends on, because I want to control the order. So the policy, the bucket has to be there, and so does the OAI user, because we're referring to both of those resources within the policy definition. So remember that the default way that CloudFormation works is that it's going to try to deploy everything in parallel. And I want to make sure that we have these resources defined prior to the policy as well as the bucket. So I think if I look at my deployment plan, we've got our OAI user, our bucket policy. So I think we're good. So let's update our CLI. We'll do first the simple validation step of our template. And then we'll run a script. And all we're going to do is grab this same command and modify that. Assuming that the validation process works, we're going to say S3 deploy. The stage will be deploy S3. Variables, what do we need here? We need a stack name. So we'll follow that same theme. We'll just call it demo S3. Did I pass anything else in here? I think everything's created. So these we're going to set in the change set so we don't have to worry about variables. Okay, so I think that's it. So let's just grab this. And we'll dump that down here. So it's the S3, we got the stack name, the tags are set. We are going to override some parameters, right? Because we didn't set the default values for owner email, and environment, so we have to pass that. This stays the same. All the rest of this stays the same. The thing that I always do when I'm creating these templates is I always forget to add the stage. So let's go back up here, right? Validation happens in parallel. We're going to look at the ACM template. We're going to look at the S3 template at the same time. And then we have a rough order in which we want to deploy these things. It's not that it deploys everything not that it deploys everything automatically anyways, because we always use change sets as a way to kind of protect ourselves a little bit. But it's still, this gives us the control over the order in which essentially the CI scripts are running. So let's commit this. And we'll push it. We'll flip back over to the browser. Look in our pipeline and see what this says. Okay, immediate failure. So we've got a typo somewhere. Let's see what we got. Template format error, unrecognized resource, S3. See what I did? I always do this. Single colon. All right. You'd think by now I'd be a little more aware of the fact that it's 2 colons. So let's go down. Let me just check these. 2, 2. I think it would complain about all of them, but I'm just going to check. Okay. Make another commitment. And push it. Flip back to the browser. See if we make it a little further this time. That's good. Made it through the validation. Obviously, the ACM isn't going to change at all. Let's see what happens with our S3 bucket here. Good, we're good. So if we go back here, do the refresh, there's our S3 bucket. We can go and have a look at the change set. All right, here's what it's going to do. Create a bucket, create the OAI user, and define the policy on that bucket. We can give the inputs. So in this case, we didn't have to pass any parameters in, just the variables. And look at the actual template, and then we can see, if you wanted to, the JSON changes that are being made. So we're just going to execute this. Website. Wow, there's another spelling mistake. Spelling mistakes are going to be to my demise here. So delete this. Okay, and we enable termination policy by default, so we got to go through a multi-step process there. It's good protection though. Go back to PyCharm and find configuration. Let me just have a look at these. Access control, bucket name, website, index, document, or error document. Now, I didn't change anything here, right? I just cut and pasted. I had to change that. That is okay. All right, let's try it again. Make another commit and push. Go back to the browser. Good, good, good. So I clean up the old guy. There we go. And execute our change set. All right, some success, right? The OAI user, the simplest part of the template's done, so we're good there. The bucket didn't complain immediately, so that's also a good sign. No typos there. Okay, the bucket's complete, and now we should see the policy. So I'm feeling confident at this point. I don't know if I'm shooting myself in the foot here, but let's go over to S3. There's our bucket. Okay, it's made public. Doesn't have anything in it. The permissions. Here's our access control list where we defined the ability to let public read access. And then our bucket policy is also set where we're limiting access to the OAI user. So good, we're good. The next thing is we obviously need something in the bucket. So we're just going to go index HTML, because that's our doc. And we'll make a really fancy website here. I'm going to go HTML at the end, I think. I think that'll suffice. And I'm just going to manually upload this. So if we go back to our bucket, upload, and I'll just drag. Do I have a... I think I've got my file browser open here. Just give me a sec. Yeah, here's our index page. Dive in and upload it. Maybe. There we go. Now, if we go into properties, what we should see here is static website hosting. And you see we've got this endpoint now. So that's part of the configuration. If we click this, though, we should still get a forbidden error because we set it up to allow only that OAI user access. Okay. So that's expected at this point. Go back to PyCharm here. Can close that guy. We're not going to go back there again. So we've got this. Now we need our CloudFront deployment. Okay. So we need to create a CloudFront distribution. Where's our doc? Here we go. Here we go. Okay, so there's our origin access identity. Now we're going to create a distribution. So there's two types of distribution, a web distribution and an RTMP, a streaming distribution. We're just going to go with the web distribution. And you can see it's relatively simple, but the distribution configuration can be quite complex depending on what it is you're trying to do, right? We can set up different caching behaviors based on the objects that are being requested by the clients, right? Like you can cache both static and dynamic content here, saying, hey, if somebody comes for, I don't know, a PHP page, the origin is the load balancer. If somebody's trying to get a JPEG, the origin is the S3 bucket. So mixing static and dynamic content. For purposes of what we're doing tonight, the distribution configuration is going to be relatively simple compared to kind of what you're able to do. Okay, much more flexibility here than what we're going to demonstrate tonight, but it'll give you an idea. So let's go back here. I changed my view, and we'll call this just CloudFront. Set up the parameters placeholder, and then we'll work on our CloudFront distribution. So what do we need here? The first thing is obviously define our type. It's AWS CloudFront. I'm gonna see that. I'm gonna try to be careful here so we don't get too many typos. And then the properties. So let's do this. We know that we're going to need a distribution configuration. It's just config. Something goes in there. Okay. I'm going to skip over that, and then we'll do our regular tag structure. We're going to need these for sure. So we'll put those in as placeholders for now. And then I'll go back to ACM again, and we'll just grab this. There we go. I think we're going to need more parameters, if I recall, but I'm not sure yet. We'll circle back and see. So let's go back to the browser. and have a look at what's actually in this distribution config. So we can set up aliases, the cache behaviors, like I was mentioning before, a comment, a bunch of different pieces of info. Let's see what's actually required. So far, nothing. Default cache behavior, our default root object. Obviously, we need to enable this distribution, so that's one thing that we know we need. Versioning for HTTP. Right? And this is what I mean. Like, you can get quite complex here, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that complex. We definitely have to set up our origin. So this is where we're going to point, basically say, hey, CloudFront, if you don't have something in the CloudFront distribution, that content is this S3 bucket. We'll set up a price class. We'll use North America, which I think is just, actually, we'll just do price class all for today. It's not going to last very long. If you wanted to control the cost of your CloudFront distribution, there's these the concept of price classes, and those basically are what you use to determine the regions that you want CloudFront to use. So if you did a price class 100, which is actually what we did for our website, I want to say it's Canada, US, South America is all that's included in price class 100. Okay, we'll do all for today. We're not going to worry about restrictions, certs, web ACLs. So if you're tying this into Amazon's WAF solution, we won't worry about that today. So you can see here lots of flexibility, but not a whole lot that we actually require to get this done. So let's go back to the editor. Okay, and I'm just going to keep browsing back on or having a look back here to understand what I need. I like to set a comment, so we're going to do that. So this is our CloudFront. Let's just call it demo distribution. Okay, so that's easy. Do we need aliases? We don't really have any CNAMEs or alternative domain names. We're just going to, for this demo, just set it up with www.acmewidgets.com. But if you had, I don't know, static.acmewidgets, you could put those in the aliases. So I don't think we need anything there. What we do need is to set up the default cache behavior. Let me just dive down into the default cache behavior. So again, this is what I mean when I say like lots of opportunities here to customize the way that CloudFront is going to actually deliver this content on your behalf. Allowed methods or caching methods. So we're going to compress it. We won't worry about a default TTL. I want to say it's quite large, the default TTL, but for today we're not going to worry about it. We're also going to look at the target origin ID. So we have to define that basically an identifier for the origin. So that's this piece here. And I think that's about it. Okay, so let's jump back to the browser again and set up the default cache behavior. I'm just going to have a quick look here. Yeah, I think it's just a tab. Yeah, no dash required. So I mentioned that we're going to use compression, so set that to true. We're also going to set up our target origin. Was it ID? Yeah, target origin ID like this. And this is just a name. So we're just going to call it widget origin. Okay. Looking at the list, what else do we need here? Well, to show you kind of more of a true to life example, I don't think we'll actually need this, but you can set up the values that you want the CloudFront distribution to pass on to the origin. So we could say, if you have query strings, pass those to the origin or don't. It doesn't really apply in the case of an S3 bucket, so we'll set that query string to false. But if you had traffic heading towards a load balancer with a web application behind it, like dynamic content, then you would might, depending on what your application does, might want to forward those query strings. The other thing that we're going to set up is the viewer protocol policy. And we want to redirect to HTTPS. And we're going to leverage ACM to do that. The other thing that we needed to do, if you remember back to the first walkthrough, we need to enable the distribution, and then we have to define our origins. And in our case, we have a single origin, and that origin is www.acmewidgets.com. So we have to define the domain name. And this is where we're going to go back to S3 and get the value of that S3 bucket. Okay, so we need to go up here and set, I'm just going to call it S3 stack. When I'm passing stacks in like this, I like to create the demo or the default values. So it's going to be demo S3, and then we're going to use an intrinsic function, or sorry, an intrinsic function here. We're going to use the import value. Okay, and this will allow us to pull a yet to be created output value from the S3 stack that we created earlier on. Okay. So we'll refer to S3 stack, and we're just going to call that domain. So let's, before we go any further, let's go back to S3 and set up some outputs. Okay. What are these outputs? So this is domain. And the value in this case is just get attribute. What did we call this? Bucket 0 dot domain name. Okay, and then we'll set a value for the export, or sorry, a name for the export. And that's sub. And I think we just called it domain. Okay, so that'll handle that piece. That should solve that. So that's our origin piece here. What else do we have? Oh, the name of this, what do we call it? Widget origin. Just want to flip back to docs. Let me show you what I'm looking at. So this is the origin config. We've set the domain name. We've set the ID. We're not going to worry about custom headers. Origin path. An optional path that CloudFront appends to the origin domain. So I don't think we're going to need that. We do need the S3 origin config. What's under here? This is where we refer to that OAI user we created earlier on. Okay. So I'm going to cut and paste this. So that's going to go right here. And then it was called origin. I forget already. Hold on. Try to see if we get lucky. Oh, this one's relatively easy. Origin access identity. And this is where we need to refer to that OAI user that we created before. And we want to refer to the full name that was generated for that user. And I've got this ready to go already because it's long and challenging. So this is the structure of it. Origin access identity / CloudFront. And we're going to go back to S3 and grab the unique identifier for the OAI user. So this is another export that we need to set. Where's my cursor? That we need to set in the S3 bucket. So let's go back and have a look. So OAI value, and this is just ref. Okay, because the value that this returns by default is the unique identifier. Okay, and then we're going to say export name. I forget what we called it already. Was it just OAI? Yeah, just OAI. So we'll steal this. Okay, and I think think that should do it. Okay, so that's the output. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong file. There we go. This is what I want. All right, there's our origin identification. We need the price class set up. So I mentioned that, you know, you might want to change this, but we're just going to say price class all. Okay, so we're going to leverage all 200 plus edge locations for this. And then there's also an option for viewer certificates. So let's go back and have a look at that, because I know we need this. Oh, we're certificate, sorry. Change my browser. Okay, so this is going to determine basically the SSL configuration. And this is what's important right here. Okay, we need the ARN of that certificate that we created in the very first step of our deployment plan. Do we need anything else? Default cert, IAM cert, protocol version. I think we can define this, but I don't know if we need it. And then SSL support method. Let's just check these last two. So there's a minimum protocol version. So Amazon says we recommend that you specify TLS 2008 unless your viewers are using browsers or devices that don't support it. So we'll maybe set this up. When you're using SNI only, you set support method to SNI only. You must specify TLS version 1 or higher. The distribution uses the CloudFront domain. We're not going to use the CloudFront domain. We're going to tie this to the domain name that we're gonna add here in a second. So this last piece is conditional. So what's this say? If the distribution uses the CloudFront domain name, don't set a value. So we're not going to do that. So we need to set this up. And we have two options, SNI only or VIP. Yeah, so here it says right here, this is not recommended. So we'll use SNI only. All right, so let's go back to the editor and see what we have to do here. I'm just going to pull this screen back up so I can see it. So the first thing is the ACM certificate ARN. Now, I think we can do this through this type of a setup. So we'll say ACM stack, and we'll just call this ARN. Okay, we're gonna have to validate to see if this is possible, but let's just set it up assuming that it is. So ACM stack, its type is a string, and the default is, I think we just called it demo ACM, didn't we? Okay, so in theory, that should pull back the Amazon resource name for this, but we know that we didn't put any outputs here. So let's go back to the doc and have a look what we have to do here. Make sure this is possible, I guess. I want to say that it is. We're looking for the certificate manager. There it is. So what we're going to do here is just look at the outputs section. Or return values. So just a ref responds with the ARN. So that's easy. So what we'll do is we'll go like this. Outputs. We'll just say ACM or cert0 again. And the value for this is ref cert0. Man, there we go. And I think, I think we just called it ARN. So if we go back here, yeah, okay, so there we go, ARN. And then what else did we need for, we're not going to use the CloudFront default cert, we don't have IAM. Oh, we were going to set minimum protocol version to the Amazon's recommended value, and I'm just going to cut and paste that. Okay, And then it also said the SSL support method, and Amazon recommended SNI dash only. So I think that's it. I think that's our CloudFront distribution. Okay. So we've changed a few things here. We've added some outputs to our S3 template. We've added some outputs to ACM. So before we can actually deploy the CloudFront distribution, we need to make sure that those are updated first. So let's do this update, or do this push. What did we do? We added outputs to S3 and ACM. Push that. And again, we'll go back here. Have a look at the pipeline. Well, didn't, oh, you know what? Of course it didn't fail. Didn't update the pipeline. I was all excited. Yeah, got it on the first shot. Try this again. I'm just going to copy this whole thing. Go. And did we just called this CloudFront. Okay, so there we go. And then we'll do the same for this. So CloudFront, CloudFront, and we'll call this demo CloudFront. Change that. There's our tags for the stack. Parameter overrides. Did we pass any other parameters in? We set the defaults for the stacks, so the rest of this is okay. So I think we're good there. I think the rest of this is okay. So let's actually see if this works now, rather than not pushing the updates. So I just did what I always said I'd do. I'm not going to go back to the editor. I forgot to add the stage. Hey, never fails. Okay, let's try that again. As soon as I see that error in GitLab, I know exactly what I've done. Let's see if we make it a little further here. All right, at least started this time. ACM, S3, we knew those were going to work. Let's see if the CloudFront template validates. Hey, we're good. Now the question is, does the distribution actually work, or the deployment actually work? So ACM, S3 should work. And remember, we've got to go back and just run those change sets to get the outputs added. This is the key one, because the way my spelling is, look at that. All right, third time's a charm. So let's go back to CloudFormation, and we need just to look at these change sets, and we're going to see in here we've got a couple change sets. They won't say that they're actually making changes, because what they're doing is they're just adding output values. They're not actually creating any or modifying any of the resources that are in this stack. So this should actually just come almost immediately back and say it's done. Okay, and then we have to do the same with ACM. So we should see the same situation, right? No changes. So push that. There we go. And we can look in here now and we see these outputs. So there's the ARN and there's the name. Not a great name, but it serves the purpose. And the same thing should happen here. Here's our domain, right? There's the output for the OAI user and the domain itself for S3. This is the one that we'll have to see what happens. So execute that. Property validation encountered unsupported properties. Origins, price class, viewer certs enabled. Okay, so when I see that, that's just a spacing issue. Okay. So let me, while that's, let's actually see if it, did it roll back really quick? Okay, so delete. Probably what's happened is I didn't backspace, and it's thinking that that is part of the distribution config or the default cache behavior, one of those two objects that we had already created. So we'll let that delete. Jump back to the browser. Go to CloudFront. So it started complaining at origins. So yeah, see right here? Okay, no, that looks pretty good. What did we do wrong? Maybe it's supposed to be pushed in. Let's just check. So if these were supposed to be pushed in, it would be part of the default cache behavior. It's a few levels deep here. So enabled true origins. No, that looks okay. Let's go all the way back to the main district. See, it's supposed to be under here. We've messed this up somewhere. Okay, yeah. So this needs to be pushed in 1. There's origins. So all this needs to go in 1. So does price class, viewer certs. So yeah, wrong spacing. I think that's all part of the distribution config. What did I miss here? There's a distribution config. All right. Comments, the default cache behavior, enabled, origins, price got. Okay, so maybe we're okay here. I think with that change we should be okay. So I'll just push this. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I didn't change the screen. So all I did in the editor was basically push in the enabled origins, price class, and viewer because I had it pushed back that it wasn't part of the distribution config. Has this deleted yet? So I don't know if I actually deleted this. Okay, we're good. So we don't have to worry about ACM and S3 because we did those changes already. So we've got the outputs that we need ready to go. All right, let's go back here. Come on now. There we go. Try this again. Default cache behavior. Yeah, I think I've got a spacing problem somewhere. Unsupported properties in distribution config. Default cache behavior and viewer certs. Yeah, they've got some sort of weird spacing issue here. Let's go back to the editor. Actually, let's delete this guy first because we know what the problem is. It's just a matter of figuring it out. Okay, so that's that. That should take a minute to clean up. So it complained about default cache behavior and viewer certs. Huh. Well, you know, one thing I've noticed here is I think I do need to set... We need to tell it what the default root object is, which I've missed. So that's just our index.html page. Oh, I see what it is. Oh, man. Okay. This is distribution. No, hold on. Maybe I missed that. Distribution config. Default. Enabled origins. Wow, the spacing is challenging. Yeah, I don't know what I've got wrong here. I'm looking at my little cheat sheet to see what I've done, but it looks correct to me. Pull it. Property validation failure. Encountered unsupported properties in distribution config. The default cache behavior in viewer cert. So is it a spelling mistake again, not a spacing issue? I'm just going to grab these and we're going to do the old quick cut and paste check. So I always like to do this. Where is it? Here it is. Oh, yeah. I got a U in there. So that's the first one. So I'm looking for a spacing issue, and it's not a spacing issue with that. And the other one was what? Viewer certificates. It's viewer certificate. All right, there we go. All right, so repush that. Let's go back to browser. Make sure the stack is gone. Stack is gone. We'll check our distribution. All right, there we go. It's been the evening of spelling mistakes here as we're going through these. Oh, man. ACM certificate. I can see it right even in the error message. Another spelling mistake. We'll let this clean up. Otherwise, if we get the, okay, there we go, good. If we do the push faster than the cleanup, then we'll get an error saying the stack already exists. At least the errors are further down in the template now, right? So we're getting close, I think. What's that last one? The viewer cert? Viewer certificate. SSL support method. Minimum protocol version and ACM certificate ARN. All right. There it is. The nice thing about this is once you get these templates built, right? It's one of the things that we do in our infrastructure as code library service. You know, we do all of this so you don't have to. And we spend a lot of time in what we call our dev account, ironing out all of these issues and then making the templates available, right? So you can avoid the fun that we're having here with spelling mistakes. Okay, so good. The distribution is going. That's a good sign. Didn't fail immediately. Progress. CloudFront distribution sometimes can take a bit of time. Since it didn't fail, I'm feeling pretty confident now. We ironed out all the typos. So there's the distribution. Okay, it's in progress, so that's good. Okay, the origin, we can actually probably drill down in here now and have a look. So there's the ARN, there's our distribution ID, right? We're using all edge locations. So this is the price class that we set earlier, right? It's enabled. We don't have an ACL assigned to it. We don't have any alternative domain names or alternate domain names like CNAMEs. We've got our own cert, our wildcard cert that we created before. And here's the domain name that was created for us. We're going to override that here in a second once it's done. So this looks pretty good. And, you know, we can do things like this. Today we didn't do that, but I would say it's always best practice to push your CloudFront logs off to an S3 bucket. Our origin configuration here is our S3 bucket that we created. Okay? And we've defined the origin access identity user that we talked about before. Here's our cache behaviors. We just have a single cache behavior. Right. So I think we're good. Let's see what CloudFormation is talking about. All right, still going. Hopefully the distribution won't take too long. What we can do is we can actually go over to Route 53 now and see if we can point the www.acmewidgets to the distribution. I don't know if the distribution will actually show yet or not, but let's try it. Simple routed again, simple record. We're going to say www, and our endpoint here is an alias. Oh, there we go. See, they've separated it again. It used to be that you just selected alias and you got a list of all the aliases, whether they were load balancers, S3 buckets, distributions. So there we go. I think we're deploying everything here, so it's not showing yet. Okay, so the distribution's done now. Right, deployed. You know what's interesting is I have the cert here, but I don't have the alternative domain name. I wonder if I almost need to put in here www.acmewidgets.com. You know what? We're going to edit this. If this works, I'll show you how to change it. But you go like this. Let's say edit. Okay, so now we've got this here. Maybe we need that. I always think about alternative names as something other than the default, but we didn't set the default, did we? Yeah, I think we might have needed that to define the alias. Otherwise, we would have to use this. Let's just see what happens if we that domain. I don't know if or not. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so we're hitting the website. So I think it was just that I missed the alias record. We'll give this a second here. If we go back to the distribution, it's updating. Let's go and see if Route 53 sees it. Cancel that to make it reload. There we go. Okay, so that's all we missed. So now I can say define the simple record, create the record. Okay. And is the distribution done again? It's still in progress. So while that's updating, let me show you what I missed in the CloudFront distribution. What we need here is basically an alias. Okay, so we got to go here and say aliases. And in our case, it's just like that. Okay, so let's push this just to keep everything in sync. Okay. Go back to the browser here. So our distribution's still updating, but I bet you, let's try it. There we go. It's alive. So it's working. And we got the little lock here in Firefox because we've got ACM, the cert that we created earlier on, associated with our CloudFront distribution. Right? So we can have, I always forget in here, right? Information about the cert, all that good stuff. Oh, it opened up a pop-up, so I can't see that. So let's see if our distribution is done. Always takes longer than you think, but essentially what we should see here is a change set, and the change set would modify that distribution and add the alias. So I'm going to run this. I don't think it'll make a difference at this point. And this essentially would just keep our CloudFormation stack in sync with the resource, the distribution resource that we created. Oh, look, there we go. It is going to fail now. So we would actually have to go back and, what's this saying? The cert that is attached to your distribution doesn't cover the alternative domain name. Well, that's really weird. I must have, let's go back and have a look here. So what did I do in here? I set the alternative domain name. AcmeWidgets.com. Did I typo? Oh my God. I need more coffee. It's been one of those days. See what I did? I keep saying .com when I should be typing X, Y, Z. Right? Always user error. So let's try that again. Fixed typo in alias. Go back over here. Our rollback's complete. We should see this pop in here pretty quick. There we go. Let's see if it'll execute this time. Oh, sorry, wrong screen. There we go. So the distribution is now being updated because I used the right name. This always takes a while. Also, because we're using all the edge locations, it'll take a little bit longer. But essentially, if we can get this to complete successfully, I think we'll call it a night. Because now we've... Well, actually, let's look at our deployment plan first. Make sure that we covered everything off. I think we have. Why don't we do that while we're, instead of watching this? So if we go back to our deployment plan, we set up our public cert for acmewidgets.xyz, not .com, so that's great. That worked well. We created our origin access identity CloudFront user to ensure that only CloudFront can make requests to the origin, in this case, the S3 bucket that we created. We associated a bucket policy to that S3 bucket to control access to the objects in there, and basically using the principal definition to allow only the OAI user access to that environment. We created our CloudFront deployment. That was the most challenging part actually today. And then we updated our Route 53 Acme Widgets XYZ domain to point to that CloudFront deployment. And we've tested the website now both with the CloudFront URL, right, that dynamically generated URL, and the alternative or Route 53 custom domain, I guess we could call it, that we used or that we created in step one. Okay. So let's see if our update is completed. No, I'm still going. Must be waiting for the distribution at this point. Okay. So I think we'll call it a night here, folks, as this is just sitting here kind of churning away. I appreciate again that showing up tonight. And we'll see you next Tuesday. If you have something specific that you would like to see, please let me know. We're always looking for ideas. We brainstorm these out every week as a group and just kind of come up with some things. Essentially what we're doing is we're looking at the templates in our infrastructure as code library service and basically creating those from scratch as a way to demonstrate capabilities in CloudFormation. So if there's something specific that you would love to see, let me know and we'll see if we can work it in. Okay? Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your weeks, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.